Hello and welcome to another episode of the We're Talking Drums podcast. This week, my guest is none other than the atomic clock himself, Gene Hoglan. That is right. This is bucket list guest for me, okay? And I'm sure all of you have been waiting for this one. So strap in. We're going to keep this intro short because you've made it very clear you don't like them. So if you like them, leave a comment below. If you don't like them, definitely leave a comment below. All right? All the comments. You guys can fight amongst each other. Before we hop into this episode, just want to give a big shout out to our Patreon members. Thank you very much. You guys keep this podcast going. And if you would like to support this podcast so I can get more cameras, have more amazing guests like Gene Hoglan on, head over to patreon.com/We're Talking Drums. Today it's just $2 a month and you get episodes early, ad-free, and you get first dibs on all the new merch. You get to tell me exactly who you want on here and I will listen. Okay. Other than that, we got some merch. We got some t-shirts up. Big Cartel. Links down below. Check it out. I know you want it. All the Blast Beats shirts, they're going quick. Buy them before they're gone because this is it. This is the only run you're getting from them. All right? And then we'll get some new designs in that'll be maybe even sicker than that. I don't know. I'm working on some stuff. All right? All right. We're going to hop into this episode. Not even going to tell you, because I want it to be a surprise on what we're talking about. I'm sure you're going to love this one. Here we go. My conversation with Gene Hoglan. Gene Hoglan, welcome to the We're Talking Drums podcast. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing well. We made it to the bus on time, made it to bus call way late. First time ever in about 40 years of touring, but we got here. So, yay.
Yeah, you got here and, you got to Mississauga, I guess, is where we are.
Is that where we are? Okay.
Yeah,
I thought it was Etobicoke. Is that how you pronounce it?
Etobicoke.
Etobicoke. That's what I thought.
Yeah. You don't pronounce the end of it, the
gotcha.
K-E.
Etobicoke.
Yeah. A lot of people call it E-Coke.
E-Coke? I get it.
Yeah. That's like the nickname for it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I believe it's technically Mississauga, but
right.
Either way, this is like the Toronto stop on the Amon Clock tour.
Indeed.
Yeah. How's the tour been so far for you?
It has been amazing, fantastic, awesome. Wow, all the shows have been great, and this bill is fantastic. You got Amon Amarth, DETHKLOK, Castle Rat. And, everybody seems to really be enjoying it, and all the bands are getting along. Everybody, DETHKLOK gets along with everybody. I'm a whole bunch of friendly folks, so we all have a good time with that. And, the shows have been fantastic. The crowds, I tell you, they are breaking eardrums and world records of decibels all over the place. So that is pretty cool. Yeah, it's been a blast.
That's amazing. All right. Well, today we are here to talk drums.
Excellent.
Right. I just wanted to hop in quickly and kind of like talk about the early years of your playing. You've been doing this for decades now.
Oh, yeah, right.
So when you were younger, was there any kind of inspiration that led you to play the drums? Led you towards that instrument as your instrument of choice?
Right. I suppose that was probably when I was about 7 years old, and I was like, how can I become the most obnoxious kid I can be? So, pounding on the desk, at school and all that stuff, driving the teachers crazy and all the other students and stuff. That was kind of my first little hey, I like being obnoxious. So, when I was 8, I discovered Kiss for the first time, the Destroyer album. My older cousin Ken turned me on to Kiss, and he was a big influence. He and my sister were both big influences on my early, rock and roll, interest, like the harder edge. I was always into music since I was about 2. And, discovering Kiss, discovering Peter Criss, and my instant favorite drummer. And, he was a big influence. And then, just getting myself into all the heavier side of, I guess, the classic rock, what is known as classic rock now, all the, Rush and Neil Peart, of course, Tommy Aldridge with Pat Travers, and then later with like Ozzy's Speak of the Devil album. And, all those kind of drummers. Terry Bozzio was an early guy for me. And then, Mark Craney from Montreal's Gino Vanelli, just tons of kick-ass drummers. And, I taught myself how to play through air drumming. I was serious about being an air drummer, I sitting on the edge of my bed and got my pair of drumsticks and just playing along to all the vinyl that I had at the time. And, really focusing on the drums, and I guess kind of giving myself drum lessons every time I'm playing a song. Whatever the drummer is, Neil Peart, Cozy Powell, you name it, Tommy Aldridge, all those guys, all my favorite dudes from early on, really focusing on what they're doing taught me a lot on, what to do on drums. I could always visualize what I'm playing. So, Neil Peart with his big old drum set, my air drum kit was huge. Let me tell you, dwarf Neil Peart. So, that was a really good practice for me. And so I even apply that this day when somebody who's like up there in age will tell me, man, I always wanted to try to play drums, but I can't, I don't have any room for a kid at my place, or, so I can't even start playing drums. I'm like, God, just get yourself a pair of sticks, sit down with whatever music and just air drum, you'll teach yourself how to play drums. And so the first time I ever sat behind a kit, I was like, wow, I've already been air drumming for 4 years, doing it. I've been visualizing everything. Neil Peart, I know he's got a huge kit. I got the Rush posters and the Kiss posters with Peter Criss's big, huge kit. And, just when I sat down on the kit the first time, I was like, well, this is just like air drumming, except I've got a bounce back and I'm making noise. So.
Yeah, exactly. And drums are kind of the only instrument, like as far as like the band compared to guitar or bass, where you can really practice without the actual instrument.
I swear you could do it with guitar as well. I do it all the time. Yeah, I'm a huge guitarist. I play more guitar than drums. As a drummer, I'm okay, but as a guitarist, I rip. So,
nice.
Like rhythms, I'm not a lead guy, but I'm constantly figuring out rhythms, like I can visualize a riff. If I hear somebody playing something, I could just visualize it real quick and
visualize
throw me on
the
a guitar.
Fretboard and
absolutely. Visualize the picking. I mean, all that kind of stuff. So, you can air guitar yourself to learning how to play guitar. I feel, that's how I did it. Like I was air guitaring too. And first time I got on a guitar, it wasn't quite as simple as the drums, but it was in the same ballpark of, I have a general grasp of what's happening here. I can move forward with this pretty quickly.
Yeah.
There you go.
Definitely. It's all about just visualizing it.
Right.
And immersing yourself in everything, even if you don't have the instrument in your hand, like Indeed. You can still really get the concepts of it in your brain.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And, I had never heard the term visualization. I never knew that. It's like, I'm practicing air guitar. That's what, and then practicing air drums. And somebody, mentioned to me not all that long ago that it was like, that's visualization.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, crazy. I thought that was like a new age term or something like that. But, no, that's exactly what you were doing, Hoglan. So there you go.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, after that that early stage, I guess, you started actually playing on a kit, everything like that. Being in LA in the 80s, were there any influences that like from the local scene that kind of push you towards playing like that thrash metal style and everything like that of drums?
At first, yes, there was a huge influence of mine, and his name was Brian O'Brien. The man so nice, they named him twice, from a band called A La Carte. And A La Carte were kind of the rulers of the LA scene at that time. You had, they'd been around for quite some time, since since 76 or something like that. I started seeing them in summer of 1981. They'd already been well established on the scene. Van Halen was playing many gigs with them. I hear a lot of a la carte in the early Van Halen, like first Van Halen album. It's like, knowing a la carte better out. I got into Van Halen first. I knew Van Halen first, but then I'm always a riff policer. I love judging I love looking at the lineage of riffs, and hey, this riff came from here, but that riff actually came from there, and their riff came from way back there. I'm always doing that for years. I've been doing that. So feeling the timeline of all of that. And Brian was such an amazing drummer. He was so good. He was a huge influence on me. He played a Camco kit. Those were dream kits back then. Those are some of the most styling, kick-ass sounding drums. He was a great drummer, and he had a big influence on my playing just from seeing him. And then I finally got to meet him, and then we became pals. And he came to my house one day. I was able to talk. He worked at a local music store, and I was able to talk him into coming over to my pad. And I'm an open-handed drummer, and everybody, I'm 13, maybe 14 at the time. Yeah. And everybody had, I'm still in junior high at that point. Everybody had told me that you're doing it wrong, open-handed. You cannot play open-handed. You have to cross over. I'm just like, have to, cannot. Like, that's the best way to make me do whatever I want is tell me I cannot do it. And so all I had heard from anybody who had seen me or heard me play noodling around or anything was pretty negative and trying to alter my style. But Brian was the very first guy that said, this is your setup? This is great. I had you have a mountain of cymbals over here, mountain of drums over here, and you don't have that ride just like mucking up everything, because I was a single ride player at the time. Yeah. And I kind of did before I even knew who Nico McBrain was, I was doing the Nico McBrain, the big ride way up high, right there, hi-hat right here. And so
everything's just right there. It's like accessible. It's perfect.
And I didn't know any better. I knew nothing about drums. I didn't even know how to tune drums at the time. I'm 13, 14, 15. So that was a big inspiration for me, that getting finally some positive feedback, somebody whom I respect tremendously is telling me, you're okay, man, do your thing, man, just don't listen to anybody. And I was like, yes, finally. And so it was off to the races after that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And like your setup really is uniquely yours, and it's like I guess over the years you've kind of like grown with it and changed things as you need to. And it's watching you play you can tell that it is you always, even just from the sound of it. It's like you have your own style, and I think that it is attributed to the way you set up your drums as well. So
I can see that, absolutely. Especially like say when it comes to like say a snare. I guess I'm like, I did a podcast recently with Dave Ellefson, and the first thing out of the gate that he was telling me was like, you're really known for the signature snare sound. And I'm just like, oh, cool, okay. Kick ass. And I'm like, well, that could be, I suppose, the way I do set up my snare. It's pretty flat. A lot of guys have the snare where they're just kind of brushing on the snare and stuff. And I've always set up, for 40 years, pretty flat. Everything is pretty much a rim shot for me, just to maximize the volume of everything and just the power and the terror of a snare drum. So I suppose so. And I do try to make things as ergonomically simple on myself as possible, but it is like, when the kit's set up, go sit on the kit, go sit on my kit, and you'll see it's like driving a truck. Most people have like that nice little sports car. And they're just right here. And this is his big wide, just kind of.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I like everything kind of more spread out and big. Yeah.
And it definitely makes it doubly challenging, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
My sticks, I downgraded my sticks years ago. I used to, now I play a 2B, and
Mm-hmm.
I used to play marching sticks. Like back in the Dark Angel days, everything was a marching stick. Like, so all that, like Savage Speed and all that stuff. The first Death album that I did was Individual Thought Patterns, marching stick. And that was the reason why I dropped down to a 2B, because trying to do all this like kind of tasty jazz inflected fusion type stuff, progressive rock kind of thing, to me it kind of felt like a bull in a china shop with these big old huge Quantum 3000 drumsticks.
Oh yeah.
Which was a downgrade from the DC 10s I used to play, which were the tapered ones, and then I had other big old marching sticks. So I switched first on Symbolic. I switched down to a 2B. I was like, oh, okay, this is how you're supposed to do it. And still, people come to me like, God, look at these logs, 2Bs that you're playing. I'm like,
I play 2Bs as well, and so many people are just like these like tree branches. I'm like, I don't feel that big to me.
No,
like it feels comfortable. So
these are downsized, So and I most of my sticks. The majority of the sticks I use are 73 grams. Mm-hmm. We have them weighed, like my Tech Thumper, he's got the scale and we weigh them, make sure. And ProMark, my stick company, they purposely send me the ones from 72 to 74. For tonight, for a group of songs, I will switch over to the 74s and then drop down to the 73s for some of the heavier, blastier things.
Nice.
And so, before we bought the scale, it used to just be kind of just, okay, these are heavy and these are light. And then, Dumper was like, bring a scale. We got it marked off. Right? And, okay, there's a 3, pull that one out. Yeah. There's a 74, pull that one out for these songs. So
and then you just mark the butt of them.
Yep.
So you can see them when you're pulling them out. That's genius.
Yeah, and if you want to go take a film of the rig, feel free. If we got time to do that, you're welcome absolutely. To do that. I know you got Yoke coming after this. So
yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Indeed.
To jump back a little bit, talk about snare drums. What snare drum are you using on this tour?
I have 5 snares on this tour, and the majority of them are 8x14s.
Wow, deep boys there.
That's been part of my. I guess if I have a signature sound, I've always recorded with the big deep jobbers there.
Yeah.
The one that has been working the best. We just each room that we're in. They throw up a bunch of snares, and my tech
see what sounds best in the room.
Whatever works best, and so our front of house guy Danny B has been. He's been leaning towards a bell brass 6.5, I think it is, which is pretty small for me. It's a reference, so it weighs 400 pounds.
Of course.
Most of my snares I have out here are references. I've got the Reference 1 kit, the brand new Reference 1 kit here with me, and I've got its snare that came with it, and then we have 8x14 aluminum. We have an 8x14 brass. We have an 8x14 chrome. We have an 8x4 off my chrome kit, which is an all wood snare. And that one is a, if you've seen the reference snares, you see how many plies they have. 20 ply snares. So,
you'll crazy
flip
thick.
it over upside down, and you see, like, wow, look at that. Most snares have this way around. This one's like this thick, tapered. So all the way around. It's like, wow, that is a lot of wood. It's pretty hefty, and I like big, heavy snares because. Every time I use a smaller snare for any reason, that thing's just bouncing all over the kit. We got to tape that thing down and put the locks on it or sandbags or whatever. Because I know it doesn't look like I hit very hard. Like Brendan always refers to me as the Zen octopus, but that's how I'm able to get as much power as I do, because I'm a loud player. And a lot of people said, boy, when we see you play with Dark Angel, like, we don't want to stand near the kit because, God, that's really hard the way you hit. And so having a big heavy snare that takes up a lot of the weight, it doesn't move a lot. So
it's not even like tone aside. It's just you want the weight there to keep it in place.
I'm fortunate that the tone is killer, but that weight is helpful. Now we've discovered like some of the new, like, clamper jobbers that work, like their shoes kind of things, the Velcro
absolutely.
kind of shoes. They're kind of look like a horseshoe a little bit. You put it there, put it there, put it there. And that's very helpful.
Yeah. So. And then also once you have it there, the snare is in the same place every single night. Right. So you don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, we do have the rug, the carpet, and with the markings all over the place. And those are constantly evolving. My tech thumper knows that, it takes me quite a while. From tour to tour, my markings evolve. So, I just started moving the hi-hat a little bit, pulling that in a little bit to make the opening song a lot easier to play, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, throughout a tour, you kind of adjust things.
Indeed.
And I even found no matter how well you mark it, you will go and set it up in the markings and everything and be like, this isn't right. This isn't the same as last night for some reason.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%.
Yeah, so you'll have to change it, remark it, and then 2 shows later, change it again.
Absolutely.
I don't know. If those things just move on their own.
Right.
Goblins coming in and changing it. I don't know.
Right. Little bugaboos, darn tootin'.
Yeah, it's crazy. You mentioned about playing on the individual thought patterns and symbolic records. Just want to dive into kind of the death era of your career, because those albums were and still are very heavily influential in heavy music in general.
Oh, nice.
Did you know when you were writing these records with Chuck that they were something special? Was there anything in the room that you're like, this is something great?
Not at all. No? I was at first I was kind of like, this is different. It's this new, because we did not know that the entirety of what Death was evolving into was now this, technical melodic death metal creator, that to a large degree. It didn't really feel like that. It was just, I remember hearing the material for Individual Thought Patterns. Chuck sent me a riff tape, and Human had preceded the Individual. And first of all, the Sean's benchmark drumming, he helped create a template that amazing influential drummers like Rick Kolaluka from Watchtower had helped set that bar for us all. We were all Watchtower fans. Watchtower for me is ground zero, band number one of progressive, tech metal or whatever you want to call it, progressive metal. We were all huge fans of Watchtower, and having Rick Kolaluka as an influence, having Sean's drums right before me, that allowed me to kind of open up the drums a little bit. And when I'd heard that the riff tape that Chuck had sent, I was like, wow, this is definitely, Human was pretty mean sounding, pretty savage sounding. And Sean's drums, especially with the hauling double bass on a lot of it, was just real, a good punch in the face. And the new material, I was like, wow, this is quite a departure from even Human, definitely a departure from the early days. You can hear Chuck's growth, but that's where Human was a great cusp album to move away from the more, just caveman-esque early, for lack of a better term, the more simplified earlier stuff. You could hear some of that coming along in Spiritual Healing. And then when Sean joined, he was able to just take that up to a new level. And so having that as an influence, I was always mentioning to Chuck, you know, stopping from time to time. Hey, man, are you cool with these drum parts I'm laying down? He's like, yeah, man, I'm good. You're doing, you know, you're doing great. And I've said this many times. He always would say, you know, go sick, go nuts, do your thing. You know, I've got you here for a reason. So, you know, go crazy with it. And Chuck always was good with all the parts for individual and symbolic. And it was our producers, Scott Burns and then Jim Morris, on like one beat per album, for one beat for Scott Burns, one beat for Jim Morris. While we're tracking, they were kind of like, hey man, I'm not quite feeling that one. Can you come up with something on the fly? I remember one was for maybe Jealousy, I think it was. Yeah, Jealousy for Scott, and then something, I forget the song. It's one of the deeper cuts. But I remember when Jim Morris had said, I'm not feeling that beat. I was like, I'm doing an exact Sean beat right here, right from Human. It's like fully just, okay, if you're not feeling it, I'll simplify it and make it nicer. But it didn't feel like we were just trying to write good music, you know, good metal music. And I knew that since I could play patterns on the kicks, I tried to apply that to a lot of Chuck's riffs, you know, because Chuck would have some riffs that I was like, hey, man, I could do a pattern that just matches that. I was doing that in Dark Angel tons. If you listen to some of the early Dark Angel, you know, I wrote a lot of the riffs. So writing a kick drum pattern and then writing a guitar riff that matches it perfectly. That was something I was doing in Dark Angel because I was listening to, you know, I'm a huge metal fan, and I'm just like, I don't hear anybody else doing this. So
right, those syncopated riffs.
The machine gun riffs with the kick drum things. I was like, nobody's doing that. Hey, you know, that's something we can do and apply, and that'll be our little thing that we bring to the table. I mean, there's a number of things I do feel Dark Angel brought to the table, but that's another one as we were evolving. And so applying some of that ability to what Chuck was bringing to the table with his riffs, I was like, okay, well, this is going to be a nice little melding of things. It felt special in the fact like this is a pretty good record, but I wasn't sure what people were going to think. And sure enough, you know, on Individual Thought Patterns, people were kind of starting to scratch their heads a little bit. And as I've mentioned before many times, you know, later on with Symbolic, a lot of people were just like, what is happening here? You know, some people got it. A lot of people did not get it. So, you know, it's just, you know, you got to stick in there. You got to see where the band's going to evolve with. Sometimes the fans will evolve with you. Sometimes they don't, and that's fair. You know,
and sometimes it just takes time for people to like look back on it and be like, oh, wow, this was like so far ahead of its time.
Indeed.
So when it first got released, people are just like, I don't get it.
Absolutely.
Right?
100%. And so since I've had such a long career and been involved in many projects that are exactly like that, a lot of people don't get it right out of the gate. And now I know it's okay. You will return to it.
Yeah,
you will return with a new appreciation for it. Even to this day, it happens.
Yeah. Well, and that's why you have to kind of stick to your guns on your creative vision and not like let the audience skew you in any certain direction, because you want your music to have that longevity. Absolutely. And if you're doing something authentic, then it is going to have that, or at least at the very least, you will be satisfied with the music that you released.
And that's the most important thing. That is who I write for. I'm only here to impress the other folks in the band and myself. If I like it, kick ass. If other people happen to like it, kick ass. If they don't like it, that's fine too. You know, I'll give you the shot a few years later to return to it and go, we're actually onto something here. You know, that's been the story of my career, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah,
so there you go.
Yeah. All right, to move along here.
Sure.
Once you parted ways with Death, your next main project that you became part of was Strapping Young Lad.
That is correct.
How was it working with Devin in those early days when you first joined?
it was great because Devin had such this just wah energy,
Yeah.
And I remember our first rehearsal that we had. I wasn't I was familiar with the name. I was definitely familiar with Devin through the Steve Vai era.
Right.
And when we got together and jammed the first time, I had just it was just a few days before that we had our very first meetup, and hey man, let's set a rehearsal together, And so, okay, next Tuesday we're rehearsing. I checked out Strapping's first album, Heavy as a Really Heavy Thing. I learned a number of tunes off that real quick. So we got there and just jammed them out. And he's like, okay, let's write something, let's just put something together here. Try this beat into that beat and, come up with a beat. Then, do the baka 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 kind of beat, the backwards thrash beat, and then whip it into a thrash beat. And I'm like, okay, I got that little quick directional template laid down.
Yeah.
So I threw something down, and within 10 minutes, we had written the song "Oh My Fucking God." And so that was, and I was just watching Devin just bouncing off the rehearsal walls, and that was pretty cool. And, that's where it was like, okay, we got something here. And he gave me his programmed drums demo cassette tape of the majority of the City songs, and the songs that appeared on City, plus a number of them that we recorded but didn't appear. They just didn't appear. So, he was a great programmer as well. So I, genized what he had programmed, and then we only rehearsed a total, there was I think it was a total of, I think we rehearsed 2 times for the City record, and then we went in and recorded it. And those were months apart. Maybe it was like 4 rehearsals at the most, God, Lord, but maybe it was 2 days and then 2 days. But I think it was just 1 day, then months later, another day. Yes. And then finally a 2-day rehearsal. Then we started tracking. So I think there was a total of 4 days of rehearsal for City.
For a whole album.
Yeah. And then I recorded the whole album in 1 day,
in 1
drums.
day.
Yeah, that's how it worked back then, For the most part. Death, I got a few days to record each song, but I mean, the Dark Angel albums, you get 1 day, maybe a day and a half kind of thing. And, and I hadn't done many records back then, so.
Yeah, you really, especially back then, like recording time, the only studios you had were the big studios.
Right,
like
indeed.
That's it. There's no like small basement studios or anything like that to
that is correct.
Set up for multiple days or anything, right? Yeah, so
pretty
it's
much.
Like, especially back when you're a smaller band or anything, it's a lot of money.
Indeed.
A lot of money to spend.
We were fortunate that we were able to track the drums at Steve Vai's home studio, which was called the Mothership.
Wow.
And that was very cool. I mean, there was Dean Castronovo's drums in the corner. Like, oh my God, he's my idol. Love Dean Castronova. There's his drum sitting right there. So I did grab his snare stand and placed it next to my drums. And I used that as like kind of like my towel hanger, So Dean Castronova was involved in the City recording to some degree.
Yeah,
part of his gear was there, so that was pretty good.
That's funny. So like going like playing with Devin, playing with Chuck, these guys are like renowned songwriters and like prolific influences within their genres. Do you think there was any reason why either you were drawn to them or they were drawn to you to like keep that solid backbone, like within their band and that portion of their career?
Well, I do believe that it was one of those, what is it? Just necessity is the mother of invention. Mm-hmm. Chuck needed a drummer, and we'd been pals for years before that, and we'd well familiar with each other. And we toured together, and that didn't end up so great, that tour. And when Borovoy from Blabbermouth, pre-Blabbermouth, had, he and I were in a lot of talks at the time, and he had called me up and said, "Hey man, Chuck is looking for a drummer. you're looking for a project right now because Dark Angel went on an extended hiatus.
Yeah.
And so he was like, how about you guys talking? You know, just pick up the phone, give him a call. And so we did. And by the plans were immediately put into place that, okay, I'm going to come out to Florida and then, rehearse, get this album done. And which led to touring and more shows and then being involved in the next album and things like that. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it worked for Chuck. And Chuck was always like I was saying, he was like, I dig what you do. You're here for a reason. And, do your thing. And that's pretty cool. And like, so with the Death era, I was speaking with Chuck's nephew, Christopher Steele, who's very actively involved in the Death legacy of things. Mm-hmm. And he had mentioned, he's like, hey man, just remember that a lot of this legacy is yours. A lot of the reason why Death is because of you, Steve DiGiorgio, Bobby Coble, like this is so, like when we're doing Death to All, music that honors, shows that honors Chuck's music. He's like, just remember you are an important, integral part of this entire, history of this band. I was like, wow, that's very kind of you. That's very nice. I really appreciate that acknowledgement because nobody had ever really put it like that. And this is from the family saying that, right. when he was giving us like the thumbs up for Death to All.
Well, those albums would not be the same with somebody else playing drums on them. That's like a guarantee. Like your stamp is all over those records.
Well, that's fun. And that's, for that, and especially in that era, I was always trying to, even with Dark Angel, I was always trying to at least create beats that had not been heard before. And I think, Dark Angel had a lot of that as well, but it was just surrounded by such just chaos that some of the subtleties of what were happening, weren't really captured. Like it was Sean Reinert who pointed out to me, just a dozen years ago or so, he's like, you were the first person I ever heard play, patterns on the kick drums, like with Death a Certain Life Is Not, Darkness Descends, Black Prophecies, the Darkness Descends album was filled with kick drum patterns. And I'd never heard that before, what an influence. I was like, whoa, thank you, John. I'd never even noticed. But that was one thing I was always trying to do. It's like, Dom Famularo always said, if you're a drummer, steal, because there's only a limited amount of stuff you can do, steal. And so I was like, okay, that my understanding, I do plenty of that. I always try to give proper acknowledgement, like, hey, that's a somebody's lick, that's a somebody else's lick that I'm doing. And I've always tried to, for every one thing I'd pull out of the pot, I would try to put like two in, influential things or things that might, two rides or patterns on the double kick or whatever it is, And so that's very cool about, being able to go sick and go nuts for Death. And with Devin and the Strapping record, it was the same thing. He needed a drummer and he was familiar. Devin explained to me that I think it was Terry Bozzio who pointed Devin out to my stuff on the Individual Thought Patterns record. And I think Steve Vai had turned Bozzio on, hey, check this kid out. And so I think I recall Devin mentioning something like, that's how I got to know who you are kind of thing. So, so we put Strapping together and it was great working with Devin. He's a wonderful person and he's very, such a creative mind. And also one of the main things that I took from our relationship was Devin's work ethic. Like he is a non-stopper when he's working, there is no downtime for him. And putting in a 16-hour day repeatedly, this is what we do. This is our job. So, I mean, somebody else's job might clock out after 8 hours, 9 hours, and ours, we don't get that clocking out time. So that's one thing I've always applied since then. So
yeah, you clock out when the creativity stops.
Absolutely.
Kinda, right?
Or you pass out at the end of the day, you know?
Yeah. So I feel like just hearing all this, like with Chuck and Devin, they really allowed you to be as creative as you felt necessary with them. So that's kind of seems like part of the reason why everything works so well. And you guys worked well together because they would do their thing and they just allowed you to do whatever you felt you needed. There was never any like roadblocks put up or like, no, never do that again, like.
Right. And, and I can see that. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that is one thing I've always tried to be, a malleable personality and person and drummer, to where I can work with whatever the parameters are. There are some projects I've been in where the primary songwriter gets demoitis to what they programmed. I'm okay, I'll stick to what you have programmed, no problem. And there's a lot of them where it's like, man, I have these are just basic templates. Go sick, go nuts, just do your thing. And then there are other projects where I'm like, wow, I can tell you put a lot of time and effort into these programs that you've given to me. Can I play what you put down? Because you get exactly your vision met, and I look like a genius because you're doing things that no drummer would be thinking of, and you're applying it here. So it's a win-win on both parts. You have some great parts here. You get your vision. I get to look like I'm the man because I created these kick-ass parts, and that happens as well. So it definitely runs the gamut.
Yeah, definitely. Let's hop into some DETHKLOK.
Sure.
Because we're running out of time here a little bit.
Did we not tell you how much I can babble?
No, I'm well aware, and I appreciate it. It is awesome. Great. But just to hop into,
absolutely, of course.
We're jumping ahead. Was it 2007 you started playing with DETHKLOK? 2006
is when we started recording Death Album 1, hence this being, and it's the 20th anniversary of the show, and the 20th anniversary. And the album, Death Album 1, came out in 2007.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So how was it when you got the call to work with DETHKLOK? Like, what was your first reaction, or how did that situation arise?
Well, it was a matter of the show had just started airing. I think maybe they were not on the air for that long, and I had been on the road so much that I hadn't caught the show. But there was definitely a buzz going around. A lot of my friends were like, hey, man, check this out when you get a chance. I'm like, okay, definitely. And then I think I got an email from somebody saying, hey, man, Brendan Small is looking to get in touch with you. Can we give him your number? And I was like, yeah, sure, man. And so later that day even, I got a call from Brendan saying, I got a show. Would you be interested in, I've got a budget to put an album out, a soundtrack album of the first season. Would you have any time available? Would you be interested? And I was like, I'm definitely interested, because I was doing a lot of session work at that time as well. And so I remember it was later that night that I was able to, it was probably a Sunday, the new episode was on, and they were showing a small, marathon of it. So the first thing I caught was, maybe it was off episode 2, where they were underwater and Murderface was puking. And I was like, okay, I see. It's going to be, kind of puke humor. I get it.
Yeah.
And, but the music, I was like, wait a minute, this music is no slouch. This music is this is cool. At first I might not have caught the humor, but the music definitely got my attention. So I was like, heck yeah, let's get this thing together. So when we went into the studio, Brendan had sent me a disc, a CD of, I think it was like 23 songs, but they were only pieces of songs. There were 40 seconds here, 1 minute here, 35 seconds of something here. And I was like, oh, this is going to be the cakiest little thing ever. This is the album. Yeah. And Brendan had explained, well, these are the basic templates. How it works is the art department will call me and say, hey, we need 40 seconds of music. Okay, so I'll bash something out. There you go. We need a minute of music. I'll bash something out. Here it go. And so what we did as we were recording is we built the songs, we fleshed them out each day, and then we tracked them. And then the next day we did it again. That we spent about 2 weeks in the studio every day writing a couple of songs and then tracking those. And so the big challenge for Death Album 1 was to make this song that you have just learned in 2 hours, make it sound like it's a band, make it sound like the drummer has, like all the music has been given love for 6 months of rehearsing and getting an album together. You have 2 hours to get that done. Yeah. So you really, dig deep into the stockpile of licks and fills and things that could work. And also, it is a cartoon fictional drummer that you are trying to create drum parts for. Right. So you got that on your mind as well. So there you go.
Do you harness pickles while you're writing and recording?
I do try to, because that's one thing I've always tried to do with every project. That's why Dark Angel does not sound like Death. Death does not sound like Strapping. Strapping did not sound like Testament, and so on. Devin Townsend music doesn't sound like DETHKLOK. And so I'm always trying to give each, that's a big responsibility on my part. If it sounds like Gene Hoglan, then, okay, but you want the drums to be specific to each project. You want to serve the songs to how they should be served, not just be one style on everything to where it's just like, oh yeah, that's obviously, Hoglan or whatever, because so just trying to give each project its own like elevated approach. And then you have a cartoon death metal drummer that you got to figure these things out for too. So, Pickles' style is tries to be Pickles, So there you go.
Well, I think that is like a big part of what makes you unique in that is that you are just elevating the songs to that point, and that's a part of your style.
Oh, well, thank you.
Which is when you listen to something and it's like, oh, well, that's Gene Hoglan. It's not saying like, oh, everything you do sounds the same. It's just what you do is make it the best that it possibly can be.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Like that's how I hear things.
Well, excellent. That is the intent. So I appreciate the acknowledgement. Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can definitely hear when it's you because it's, played heavy-handed,
right?
And like everything that is your style put into it and done masterfully.
Thank you very much. That's very cool.
The last thing that I want to touch on here is you've been around the metal scene, the beginnings of the extreme metal scene and drumming and everything like that. Mm-hmm. Do you recall the first time that you ever heard or saw somebody play a blast beat?
Blast beat.
We love blast beats here on the podcast. So.
Okay. Well, I tell you, that was a lot of the early, like, what would it be? God, would it be Intense Mutilations? Maybe around 1985, and they would playing on cardboard boxes, or was it, somewhere. I know that the speeds that Dark Angel were playing back in 85, 86 were so psychotic. Like if anybody can ever find a YouTube of some of those old shows, you see where, a lot of people thought that I was, we used to call it cut time. The European blast beat.
Yeah, the Euro blast.
That is cut time. And that was no bueno to be back in 85, 86, all that. And so, I was A Darkness Descends was accused of being cut time because it was so fast. It's like, no, I'm actually, we slowed this down. We slowed this album down I slowed my tempos down so it could be recordable. But, I guess maybe Johnny Tabarez from Hyrax, the way when we were doing shows together, the way he would just absolutely spaz out on the drums. That was psychotic. Just like, whoa, what is he doing? That's amazing. And that was, I don't know what the unison bomb blast or unison blast.
Hammer blast.
Is that what it is? Bop, bop, bop. When it's in unison?
Yeah. That'd be
the hammer blast. Okay. Well, he was hammer blasting in 1985, 1984, 1985. And then I remember, the young band from LA, Cryptic Slaughter. They were kind of doing that sort of approach they became a band in about 87, I think it was. And they were doing some of that stuff as well. And, that was kind of some of the early parts of it. I think there is video proof of Stevie Wonder doing the hammer blast with double bass.
Oh, yeah?
Absolutely. From 1967. So Stevie Wonder. Yes.
Stevie Wonder.
He invented the blast
beat. You heard it here first.
Yeah. He's baka, 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 double kicks going baka, 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 not quite to the baka, baka, baka. But the very first time I heard a blast that actually impressed me and I liked it was on the first Cradle of Filth album with Nick Barker on drums. And that was a hammer blast. And I was like, now we're talking, because it used to be cut time. That wasn't very strong to me, but that hammer blast, that was where like, yes, I get this. That's good. And that was kind of the strapping approach when we were doing blasts, that hammer blast. And that's when I started trying to write patterns underneath all of that. And I remember Nick and Tony Laureano from Nile at the time, they came to me and they said, hey, you invented a blast. You invented the Hoglan blast with all that marching kick drum stuff that you're doing on top of the, I guess, hammer blast. They're like, nobody else does that. That's you. I was like, well, kick ass. Cool. I had no idea. So,
you have your own signature blast beat now.
There you go.
There you go.
Mind blown.
Yeah. And it goes back to you trying to syncopate all the guitar rhythms with your feet, and then eventually use it over or under a blast beat.
Right.
So,
who knew? It just gave it a little more flavor than just doing the single foot bop, 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 or the double the lazy way I would do it. Bop, 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 bop. I was in that, and it's like, oh well, that's really slow. So just do that. You can do that
sick,
stuff on top. Right? Sure, man. Anything to make it sound a little more intense.
Right.
I'm all about it.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, Gene Hoglan, thank you very much for coming on the We're Talking Drums podcast, man. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
The pleasure was mine, absolutely. And best of luck to everybody. And, come out and catch some DETHKLOK if you get a chance to see it. And
hell yeah.
Bear McCreary will be hitting the road over summertime. Come check that out. That's a totally different style of Hoglan drumming. He's got a new album coming out. He just had a new single drop today, a song called Black Box that features Joe Duplantier on vocals.
Oh, wow.
And, there's, like with all Bear records, there's always an all-star cast of amazing musicians. You got Slash again on the new album. You've got Laura Christine. You got Steve Vai. You have Claudio Sanchez from Coheed and Cambria on some vocals. You got Tim Henson on a whole ton of guitar on it as well.
Jesus.
Just cavalcade of Pete Griffin, just tons of incredible musicians. So check out the new Bear McCreary record. Yeah, it's coming out very soon.
Yeah, check out the new single. Yeah.
Indeed.
Check them out on the road. There you go.
All right. Yeah. Take care. We'll see you guys. Thank you.